All right, ladies and gentlemen, it does appear that there's another update to the Prydwen tier list. And let me be honest when I say that the Prydwen tier list has actually been pretty good, has actually been managed very well across the past couple of months. With good old Sweat joining the team, providing a lot more reasoning and a lot more backing for all of the changes that are being made, it's pretty universally agreed that this tier list that we're seeing over here is one of the better ones for the Wuthering Wastes space. However, it is a little bit specific, and there are some pretty big problems with it that I hope are going to be solved with time. And we'll be diving into those in just a second. And those problems are related to, well, of course, the newest endgame mode that has just been released, Whimpering Wastes, that focuses a lot on AoE. You're not going to be seeing a lot of that, and a lot of recognition of that in here though. So with that, let's get right into the changelog. Let's see what's changed with the release of Phoebe. So, first and foremost, Phoebe has been added to the tier list. She is a tier 0 DPS. And putting it as bluntly as they can, she's the best free-to-play DPS in the game. One thing about Prydwen is that they really highly value efficiency, they highly value ease of building, they highly value like low effort, low budget, and high performance for a character. And this is the thing, because she has a weapon that doesn't need pulling, the new Ocean's Gift, because she has teammates that are free to play, like Spectral Rover and Verena, because she has teammates that don't require you to pull it all, she performs a little bit below Jinsei, even with all of her premium stuff. And the fact is, because of her relative strength with all of the free-to-play options, and the fact that she can get better with more investment and the use of quick swapping across her rotations, and of course, the big one, new Spectral Frazzle supports on the roster because Rover kind of doesn't amplify damage that much at all, she is a character that can only get better with time. However, I think it is fair to say that she does have a lot of specificity, that she requires a teammate like Spectral Rover on pretty much all of her lineups to actually do anything in the first place, but it's also fair to say that everybody is going to have Spectral Rover, they're going to have them at high dupes, and they're going to get a lot of value inherently out of Phoebe in the first place, because everyone is going to have her team comp. Everyone's going to have a Verena, or hopefully at this point in the game you do, because you have the option to get Verena guaranteed, and everybody's going to have Spectral Rover, and that gives her reliable performance at a very high level right from the get-go. The second you pull her, you get the Ocean's Gift from the event, and you're basically ready to go, because she's also very easy to build. So I can see why she's ranked very high, but on the damage spectrum, I don't think she's necessarily at the top. I do believe that damage-wise, there are other characters that do more than her, but her ease of use and ease of building are, I think, what really weigh into the rankings here. Next up, Spectral Rover. So they're going to be the first and only character that had their kit buffed. The addition of Spectral Frazzle in version 2.0 was something that strengthened them quite a bit. However, it didn't strengthen them by a lot because there wasn't anybody that used the Spectral Frazzle particularly well. However, because of the addition of Phoebe, and Phoebe being very free-to-play friendly and having a lot of power, Spectral Frazzle is going to be dragging Rover up. She's going to be dragging Rover up from tier 3 all the way to tier 1.5. And so, because people are using the reasoning at Prydwen, they're using the reasoning that Mortefy is a tier 1, because even with his restricted team building, they're making tier 1.5 fair for Spectral Rover. However, it is fair to mention that Mortefy might deserve a bit of a rank up because he's now being used for Phoebe as well to amplify a good bit of her damage. Spectral Rover also has the multi-role tag, as they can use Rejuvenating Glow, they can use Moonlit Clouds, and they can also use Eternal Radiance quite well in their teams, especially if you're trying to run a dual DPS Phoebe comp. That's a bit more expensive though. So one MC went up quite a few spots. Now we've got the other MC. And one thing, ladies and gentlemen, that we all get access to in this version is none other than the S6 of Havoc Rover. This massive boost of 25% to their crit rate. This is more than a level 90 weapon. This is more than a level 25 4-cost Echo. This is the biggest and one of the biggest critical rate boosts that is currently in the game, and all it requires is that you activate your Forte circuit with a heavy attack. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is incredibly strong. Lets them run very crit damage heavy builds, especially with something like Changelog's weapon, and they can dominate content that way. And so because of that, ladies and gentlemen, Havoc Rover is getting a pretty big boost from tier 1 to tier 0.5, sharing the spot with a lot of the top DPS characters in the game. And so they got their access to their S6 for free in 2.1. That's the crit rate boost we were talking about. more than the 5-star sword, more than the Echo. Not actually pre-watched, but that's the reasoning that everybody uses. It's a huge buff, and enough to put them in tier 0.5. It gives them a lot more consistency and allows you to do a lot more crit damage heavy builds again, and have them nuking for a lot across their rotations. And lastly, well, we've got Ling Yang, down from tier 2 to tier 3. They wanted to drop him sooner, but they did give him a little bit more space to breathe with the new Frosty Resolve set. They also tried to fix up his rotations, but he still just doesn't do that much damage. He's still, even with all of this help and all of this effort put into like learning how to play the guy, he's got some pretty big issues still. But they're gonna go ahead, they're gonna put in all of the new calculations and all of the new rotations anyways. This is where I'm saying like the whole like effort from the team is showing through. Even though the character sucks and is super unpopular, they're still going ahead and they're doing their due diligence across the update to, you know, shine some sort of light on him despite his lack of popularity. Next up, some general thoughts on the tier list as a whole, and I think this is where stuff has the potential to get a little bit spicy. We had a lot of changes planned for our 2.1 tier list update. Some changes went through to go along with Phoebe's release. When it comes to her and her teammates, we are fairly certain of our placements, so her pull value should remain unchanged from what is seen in this new edition of our tier list. However, we face a new problem. 2/3 of our DPS category is in our top 2 tiers. It's very top heavy, and everyone else is in the bottom 2. We noticed a clear discrepancy in power, and some characters are inferior to others within their current tiers, which we'll explain below. This made us want to consider cascading the tier list down, basically making it less top heavy and more evenly distributing the characters across the various rankings. These changes may go through for some characters or it won't for others, and we ask for your feedback and we'll do extensive testing to see how we proceed about the tier list. All updates going through with Brandt's release on the second half of patch 2.1. So almost you can think of it as like a curve in a class, right? Where only a certain number of people can get an A, only a certain number of people can get a B, and only a certain number of people can get a C, D, and F. There's too many people on this tier list getting A's in the class, if that makes sense. And they need to have some people average down to make it look like more of a decent distribution. However, the thing is, that can feel a little bit forced, right? That can feel like they're just arbitrarily moving people down just so the tier list looks nicer. And so I really do hope they have great reasoning for all of the updates that they're going to be doing and all of the moves that they want. So let's see what some of those reasons are. Baizha is being placed on the watch list to cascade in relation to Spectro Rover, who can also fill the role of support and is stronger in Phoebe teams, but is currently placed a tier lower. So Baizha might be moved down, or Spectro Rover might be moved up. Camellia. Camellia is our main point of discussion on the whole watch list. She determines a lot of stuff. We consider placing her alone in tier 0.5, so below all the other DPSs but above the rest of them. Above anyone but Jinxie, Carlotta, and Phoebe. The reasoning is because Camellia has some inconsistency. She needs to hit her attacks for her rotations to be smooth. If you ever miss any of her attacks and you lose out on that pistol gain, you can have a rotation that's completely scuffed. You're chasing the enemy for a lot longer than you need to, and the end result is that your rotation and your damage is delayed. And the second that all of her attacks don't hit, her rotations become longer and awkward. Yeah, exactly what I was saying. We factor in difficulty when considering our tier list placements, but Camellia fundamentally isn't really that hard to play. The issue is that her attacks do not reliably hit. If you're using Blossom mode, use White-haired mode more. So missing with Camellia is a huge issue, which isn't just exclusive to people that are casuals or like worse at the game. Even for expert players, right, who are doing insane rotations, who are playing super sweaty, they do have issues with missing her attacks, delaying her ephemeral, and losing time that way. So sure, on paper, she cheats about the same as Jinxie. They have comparable, similar damage, but in practice, it's easy to see that, well, a lot of her damage can miss. Her DPS technically goes down because she's spending more time running, and the end result is that she's more closer to Havoc Rover's S6 than Jinxie in their actual testing. This could also mean that they need somebody better with Camellia on their testing team. That's also something to factor in. However, we don't know what goes on in their testing. So we wonder if we should drop her by herself in tier 0.5 for that, with every other DPS also going down half a tier as a consequence. So this would mean characters like Jian, like Zhang Liao, all of those characters would additionally be going down too, with Camellia taking the sole role in the tier 0.5 spot. I you know, we'll just have to see what the rankings look like. I could see some people getting very upset by this, but I think one way that they could really help augment this argument is just talking about what difficulties Camellia has, maybe showing a bit of a video, showing like a live demonstration of how her rotations can get fucked up, and kind of go from there. I think that would be a fair thing to do. So, Chang Li, God bless. We've been considering dropping Chang Li for a long while now. We're unsure of what to do with her, since for casual players who aren't quick swapping constantly, she would land around tier 1. That being said, for expert players, she's undeniably tier 0, and our expert tag doesn't cover a discrepancy of 2 tiers. So she's placed on the watch list as we're considering simply dropping her to T1 to cater to our core casual audience, and specify in her reviews and pros and cons page that she's a tier 0 at expert level. Maybe add a Giga expert tag to her, because again, if you're playing this character like a main DPS, if you're not quick swapping like the sweatiest player on earth with her, she just simply does not perform. So I think it's fair. Very high skill investment involved for her to be at a baseline level of strength. We'll see what happens when Brant is released, because we do have full information on his kit, and we have to see what it looks like in practice. Encore, placed on the watch list to cascade with Camellia and Jian. Remember, they're all kind of like moving down a tier. They're all moving down a tier to remove the top heaviness. Jian and Encore go in the same tier as their single target performance is identical. Jian only has the edge in AoE, but this barely matters for Tower of Adversity as it's mostly boss focused. Potentially fair. But this is one of the problems that I was talking about. Jian is quite literally probably the best character in the new Whimpering Wastes game mode, but they don't have a tier list for that, unfortunately. So, Jian is going to be placed on the watch list to cascade with Camellia. His damage performance simply doesn't match hers, as to be expected, as Jian is a 1.0. How about this? How about expected, because Jian doesn't have a limited 5-star support like all of the other tier 0 DPSs do. And Zhang Liao does as well. So just wait for his to come out, buddy boy. I guarantee Prydwen will be eating their words for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So if Camellia drops, we think he should drop a tier 2. I guess this is the thing. If we're thinking about it in just terms of boss slaying ability, sure, right? Jian has trouble tracking certain mobile bosses. Jian has, like, you know, certain DPS decreases from, like, dodging or, you know, parrying attacks as well. And, you know, characters like Carlotta and Jinxie are way better at bosses. That's fine to say. They're also much easier to use. And if ease of use is factoring into Prydwen's tier list, Jinxie and Carlotta are quite literally probably some of the easiest characters in the game that require very, very like static baseline rotations, just requires memorization, no alterations they need to do in their rotations to ever deal their damage, while Jian is far more difficult to use at an optimal level. So I can see if ease of use is a big factor, sure, so give him the expert tag. Anyways, Zhang Liao, he's going to be placed on the watch list to go down with Camellia. Same exact reasoning over here. At a casual level, he's not as good, but when he's played at an expert level with somebody like Chang Li and does quick swap, he does, you know, have a lot of potential. So they're thinking about dropping him lower, but then giving him the expert tag. So his tier actually goes up when he's being played at a super hyper optimal level. And so Yinlin, placed on the watch list to go down with Zhang Liao. Yinlin is kind of like the ideal partner for Zhang Li, and she's outclassed by Jeja in the Jinxie teams. And so they're thinking, if Zhang Li goes down a tier, so should Yinlin. I do think that Yinlin has some additional use cases, especially as like a raw liberation buffer. You could even consider playing Yinlin with Phoebe if you're trying to have like a little bit of fun and try some stuff out. We'll see, right? I do think she has a lot of damage potential, does a shit ton of personal damage with Empyrene Anthem, and it's a significant increase. So I don't know how I feel that much about this one. And lastly, Yohu, placed on the watch list to cascade in relation to Baizha, who's significantly more flexible than Yohu, while retaining very similar strength in Yohu's optimal teams. This character just sucks. I would just recommend, unless there's like a coordinated attacker who is like a main DPS coordinated attacker, just don't even build this character. She's just so awkward to use, and her buffs are like so specific. She's only used in a handful of teams, and investing in her is just inherently like such a bad idea compared to any other sustain or any other support, because she's very damage focused but doesn't do damage. Just avoid her like the plague. Just avoid her like the plague. So let's move on into the actual tier list. So here we go. Right now, this little I means that the character's on a watch list, and they're probably either going to move down, or in some situations, they're going to move up. But all the characters on the watch list for this time are supposed to be moving down. So over here, they've got in tier 0, the new addition of Phoebe, along with Carlotta, Jinxie, and Camellia, who's looking to move down to tier 0.5. Additionally, right, in tier 0.5 currently, they have Jian, Zhang Liao, Havoc Rover, who's moved up, and Encore. If what they're suggesting goes through, Camellia moves down to tier 0.5, and the rest of these characters move down to tier 1. Because guess what, guys? Well, there's nobody here. There's not a single character in tier 1 or tier 0.5. So that's kind of like one of the main reasons for why they were making this update in the first place. It looks kind of fucking weird. I think that's fair to say. It looks kind of weird. And you could say, oh, why don't we move Calcaro and Chisha up, or maybe Alto or Ling Yang up to help round this out? Because these characters suck ass. It's because these characters all suck ass to some degree. They're just not good. And so they maybe, in Prydwen's eyes, don't warrant being tier 0. Or tier 1.5 or tier 1 just because of how not good they are. And guys, let's be real here. Chisha is fun.
Ooh, I can solo holograms with her. Oh my gosh, I'm having such a...
She's not good, guys. At least in the tower, she's just not that good. Hybrid. So no changes being made to tier 0, and they're all going to be thinking about moving these characters down to tier 1. I would say though, it might be fine to just keep them here, because if this is the case, you're going to be moving them down, and then now there's going to be nobody in tier 0.5. There's going to be nobody in tier 0.5 if you move them down. And then tier 1 is going to have 4 characters in it. I actually think that from a visual perspective, at least, it's going to become too medium heavy, the sub DPS category. It's going to become too medium heavy if they move down these 2 characters. So maybe, I think that maybe it might be worth moving down Chang Li and then maybe moving up Mortefi, because he works in the Phoebe teams now. And it's not like Sanhua works with characters that aren't basic attack focused. She works with Encore and Camellia. Who else is she really working with here to fully buff them, right? And Mortefi's personal damage is very good, so maybe he gets moved up. And in support, these characters just moving down, I think that's fair. Baizha has so much clunkiness. Yohu just sucks. I think it's fair to move them down and then just kind of really solidify that these 2 characters are heads and shoulders above the rest. They are literally head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to their ability to sustain and amplify damage. They're just better. Overall, I think the decisions on the watch list do make a decent amount of sense. The only one I'm against is moving Yinlin down. I do think she has a comfortable spot at tier 0.5. I would move Chang Li down and then move Mortefi up. Their reasoning for, you know, moving down characters on this side, I think it's fair, but it is unfortunate, right? To see all these characters that we've grown comfortable with, right? In the tier 0.5 category, especially a character like Rover being moved down to tier 1. But if we're being honest, there does need to be something done about this. However, this is sort of like the counterpoint, and this is sort of like the elephant in the room. Whimpering Wastes, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll just show you some information about this mode. Whimpering Wastes is arguably harder than the Tower of Adversity for a lot of accounts. And let me just show you why. You have a lot that you need to do in these game modes to get 100%. You have a lot of enemies, a lot of different waves, a lot of different resistances. And the main thing about this is the fact that, well, if you don't have a fuck ton of AoE, right, a character like Jian or a character like Camellia or Zhang Liao, you are in for a very, very rough time in this game mode. And so when it comes to this tier list, Prydwen, I do think it is time for us to have a second one. Like how Honkai Star Rail has a tier list for Pure Fiction and MOC, it is time to have a secondary page to this and a tier list for Whimpering Wastes. Because guess what, guys? Once that occurs, Camellia is going to be tier 0. Jian's going to be tier 0. Zhang Li is probably going to be tier 0.5. You need a separate tier list to account for AoE. Phoebe needs to be like tier 1 or tier 0.5 or below, 1000%. Jinxie and Carlotta are no good in that game mode, but we need to see more AoE focus. The Chang Li can be higher up too because she does a lot of AoE. And Rosia tier 0 as well, right? There are a lot of characters that are absolutely bonkers in this type of content. And right now, the characters that are good in Whimpering Wastes might not perform as well in TOA, or might not be as like budget friendly in TOA. But the characters that are good in TOA, like the Jinxies and the Carlottas and the Phoebes, they don't feel that good. Try using Absolution Mode Phoebe in multi-wave content where you're not applying Spectral Frazzle. She does no damage. She sucks ass in this game mode. Phoebe is so bad in this game mode, it's insane. And the thing is, Jinxie will overkill, over-nuke enemies, and just not have uptime on her damage. And Carlotta, what are you doing during Death Knell? You're firing off one shot when there's like 10 of them. You might as well just cancel all of your shots as Carlotta and then just only use the final one to clear a wave. And then you're doing single target damage again afterwards. It's rough. It's just, use a character like Jian, right? Use all these characters over here that are in like the lower area except for Encore, and you're going to be blowing stuff up. And Rosia is just going to group, gather, be an absolute menace to those waves. And Changli has a lot of built-in AoE. So I would say, Prydwen, I maybe would have just, you know, preemptively made a tier list for WuWa, for Whimpering Wastes. I think that's the big miss that we're seeing over here, because it would give so much more value and recognition of value that these characters have, like Jian, the Zhang Liaos, the Camellias, and the Rosias, that is currently not being reflected when all the list is looking at is the TOA. And Whimpering Wastes gives the same amount, or if not more astrites than TOA. And so one is actually a lot more valuable than the other. So let me know what you all think. I think that's the big miss. Peace out.